Welcome, everyone, to what is going to be a fantastic conversation today. Thanks for joining our executive lecture series that we have. And today we have Jason Jordan with us. Jason Jordan is an icon in the coaching world, and we are stoked to have you. Jason, if you are not aware of him, if your head has been under a rock, he's a best-selling author of a book that is a must-read for me and everybody that I work with. It's a book that it's on my shelf. I'm looking at it right there right now. It's Cracking the Sales Management Code. Jason is a managing partner at Vantage Point. It's a global leader in sales management training. Jason, welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob.
Hey, fill in the blanks. What does the group need to know about you? I mean, people are here because they want to hear you. Give us the 60 seconds on Jason Jordan, what you do at Vantage Point.
Sure. So as you said, I'm a partner at Vantage Point. We're the global leader in sales management training. We're focused on training and developing sales leadership, first line managers, second line, all the way up. We work with big global companies, companies that have a lot of sales managers. So our marquee clients are probably GE, 3M, RBC.
Little companies that you may have heard of before.
Yeah,
huh?
Little small companies. And so we focus on sales management issues. And the top ones would be coaching, obviously, which we're going to talk about today, pipeline management, forecasting, using CRM, actually leveraging CRM to get value out of it. And so we work with sales leadership teams to try to do all the things that the sales leadership team should be doing, but better. And so we were just chatting actually before we got going here. I also teach at the University of Virginia in the business school, teach sales and sales management, which is loads of fun. And we have a new book, Michelle Vazana, my co-author. We have a new book coming out later in the year on sales coaching, which should be hopefully insightful for folks. So it's not going on.
Can't wait to get that book in for me, right?
Yeah.
Hey, so sales coaching, that's what you started with. I wrote down a few things. We may go some other places today. I hope we do. I hope we have some, if it's like what we usually do, we'll have some lively dialogue today, I hope. And we're starting today, Jason, with the topic that it's like becomes so hot in sales. I'm starting to wonder if it means the same thing to everyone. Sales coaching is what you started with. What's your definition of coaching? And do you think it's important to start with a clear definition of what coaching is?
Well, coaching is, and it's embarrassing to even say that it's a hot topic. I mean, it's been around for what? I mean, John Henry Patterson in the 1800s started what basically is modern sales management. I assume coaching is, or some form of it's been around since then. But you're right that it has been a hot topic. And especially as we get to sales enablement, which is a new reused topic. Trying to integrate all these things into better coaching. But you're exactly right that coaching it's like a sales process. It's a word that means everything and nothing simultaneously, depending on who you ask. And I think it is most important to have a definition around coaching. I think that coaching gets used in this kind of ethereal way. We need our sales managers to be doing more coaching. Well, you probably do, but what does that mean? And until you give someone a definition and you define what it is they want, just like selling, you give salespeople a sales process. You define it. You say, this is what it looks like. This is how we're supposed to be doing it. Coaching is the same way. If you want it to take place in your organization, then you have to put some boundaries around it, and then it will actually happen. But again, coaching is this word that people use, and I don't know that it's very well defined in most cases. But that's the first critical step in getting it to.
You got a definition you want to throw out to the group?
Well, I was thinking about this as I was getting ready for the session. It's almost like it is really hard to define. In my mind, so sales coaching, if I had to define it, sales coaching is a value-added interaction between a sales manager and a sales rep. And by value-added, I mean that it changes the way the salesperson either thinks about their job or the way they do their job, right? So, I mean, to me, coaching isn't what a lot of people think of as career development activity where you're trying to identify long-term goals and do that. I mean, coaching is something that should be very applied to the job of a salesperson, like managing pipelines and making sales calls and growing their territories. And so in a nutshell, I say that coaching is a value-added interaction between a manager and a rep, but that kind of puts a lens on it that it's more a mode of managing than its own activity. In the way that I think consultative selling is a way of approaching your sales role.
Yeah.
It's not its own activity. I think that coaching is to sales management what consultative selling is to sales.
I really like that definition, Jason, because what I love is what you're saying. Basically, if I was to take that and break it into parts, I like that value-added part. Mm-hmm. Tell me if I'm saying it wrong, but I think that this is what you're saying. If a leader's not adding value to the rep, what use are they?
Yeah, I'll give you I'll give you another story that I like to tell. So Neil Rackham probably, right? He wrote Spin Selling, legendary guy in this field.
Changed the world, changed the sales world with that book.
He did, literally, he did, and other research he's done. I mean, I'm not even sure that's his best book, but it's the one that is most known. But anyway, so Neil told me one time he wrote a book called Rethinking the Sales Force with John DeVincentis, a McKinsey guy, and it really tried to lay out some definitions between transactional selling, consultative selling, something they called enterprise selling. And what he would say about consultative selling, he said, you can know you've made a good consultative sales call if the buyer would be willing to take out a checkbook and write you a check, pay you for the value that you created during that sales call. And I think that coaching is the same way with sales managers. I think that a good coaching interaction is so valuable that the salesperson would take out their wallet and pay the manager for having that conversation, because they had a conversation that was so valuable that they saw something they were about to do wrong. They saw a better way to approach the sales call or to pursue an opportunity. They saw a deficit in their skill set that they can address. And I think that idea that, would a salesperson pay for the interaction that I just had with them as a sales manager? Sadly, I think that most salespeople would pay to avoid interactions with their sales managers. And
it's totally true.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to most salespeople, an interaction with the sales manager, whether it's a pipeline review or whatever it is, I mean, it's just a drain on their productivity in their mind, and it should be the exact opposite. So, if a salesperson has an interaction with the sales manager, and it's so valuable that it's obvious value's been created, that was a good coaching conversation.
So, how do we get there then? I mean, so we agree, and if people say coaching is there to add value, make us better, how do we get to this point where coaching is just what you do to the people who aren't performing? How do we get there?
Well, I think that, as I said, it comes down to definition. I mean, as you open the conversation, and the biggest problem that we see is that when most people think about coaching and they want coaching to take place, they don't really apply it to a useful activity. And so, from our perspective, coaching is useful if it's applied to something, such as building and maintaining a sales pipeline. Right? I can coach a salesperson to build and maintain a healthy pipeline, or pursuing opportunities. I can coach a salesperson to pursue their opportunities more strategically or more successfully. Making a sales call, which is maybe one of the most classical forms of coaching. I can coach someone to make a better sales call. I could even coach someone to use their tools better, like CRM or what AI, whatever it is, and I think that's the departure point that's necessary that most people miss, is that coaching isn't just coaching, right? Coaching isn't this thing you do that makes salespeople better. Coaching is something you do that makes a very specific thing that salespeople do better. And so the departure point from our perspective is, okay, you want coaching, that's fine, got it. So what do you want coaching to accomplish? And then, if they say they want to improve their close rates, and that's the outcome they want, then we can say, okay, then let's focus the coaching on better qualifying opportunities or better pursuing opportunities. And that can be the answer. But if they say, look, we're really trying to grow our existing accounts this year, then, we need to develop a coaching program that helps people manage their existing accounts. If the goal for the year is to cross-sell products, maybe, or to upsell products, then, there is coaching for that, but it looks different than coaching for acquiring new customers, different from coaching for increasing win rates, different from, and so it's really only to the point that you can specifically define what it is you're trying to accomplish can you really design a coaching program that's going to be useful for that purpose. So coaching is not coaching. Coaching is only a way of developing a certain skill set or behavior in your salespeople.
That's a really insightful way of looking at it. And I think that if companies started to approach that and segment it, there really are a lot of different types of coaching. I've heard you talk about that as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's part of why we've gotten to the point that reps would pay anything to not be coached, just because it's so non-focused. Is that an issue as well? Is part of it, not only do we not have a good definition, but we don't have a clear objective of what coaching is about inside a company?
Yeah, it's very clear. So I think coaching is comical in the way that it's probably the only thing in the sales force that everyone's for and no one is against. So if you try to deploy coaching, if you try to deploy a CRM, someone's going to complain, right? If you try to deploy a sales process or new sales methodology, someone's going to complain. But no one stands up against coaching. Sales leadership wants it to happen. They probably expect it's happening. Sales people like to receive it when it's good and valuable. Sales managers even like doing it. If you ask any sales manager, just pull them, aside in the hallway and say, if you had 5 more hours in the week, what would you do with those 5 hours? They're going to respond in some form of coaching. They're going to say, I did in the field more. I'd spend more time with my reps. I'd spend more time on deals. But everyone loves it, and yet it doesn't happen. And so the very first thing is just this definition of how it's supposed to really take place.
So let's stay in this vein for a second. And this is something that I've heard you say. I relate to it because I believe this. I advocate this as well. I'm going to get this. I'm looking at my notes right here, make sure I get it right. I've heard you, and the quote I heard attributed to you recently was, when you want to improve performance, the place to start is the sales leaders, not the salespeople.
Yep.
Did I get that right? I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a second?
Well, this is how this is one of the ways that our company came to be. And so I was a management consultant for many years before we got into training and development, and it never, ever failed. So we would, as a consultant, we go in and redesign a compensation plan, redesign a sales process, redesign some reporting, redesign the territories, whatever the change was, the piece of the transformation that I was involved in. We'd go through the analysis, we'd do the change, we'd reinforce, we'd go away, we'd come back 9 months later and go to the head of sales and say, hey, how'd it go? Right? Just checking in. Always. It went really well over here. It didn't go so well over there. So, okay, well, let's break this down, right? What went well over here and what didn't go well over here? The answer is always, I'm sorry. The answer is always, well, over here, the VP of sales really took it and made it a priority. And over here, it was, number 4 priority. And it's always that leadership got behind it. Any change in the sales force, when leadership's behind it, it can't fail unless it's such a disastrously bad idea. But I've yet to see smart sales managers and sales leaders try to implement something stupid. What I have seen is them implement it half-ass. And that's when the problem comes. And so the idea that sales leadership makes or breaks anything, whether it's CRM or methodology or training and coaching program, whatever it is. And, I think that really comes down specifically to the frontline sales managers. And that's the leverage point in every sales force that we see that's under leveraged. If you're trying to do anything, change anything in the sales force, and your frontline sales managers aren't capable and willing to drive that change, then you're off to a bad start. So we think that for every sales training program that's failed to live up to promises, for every CRM tool that hasn't been adopted, pick any change. For any change in the sales force that's failed, it's frontline sales managers' fault. And if it's frontline sales managers' fault, it's sales leadership's fault for not enabling them and motivating them to do the right thing.
It's a healthy litmus test to say to a leader, if you like results, look in the mirror. If you don't like results, look in the mirror. That's a healthy litmus test, I think. I wish it could always be, even if it's good, look in the mirror. But I believe what you're saying, Jason. People are the world's greatest reflectors. They are. And especially in sales teams, they reflect what they're being managed to. So I get a couple questions come through right now that are based on what you just said that I think are timely. So one of the things that we're talking about is got to change the leaders. What are some of the common things? So when you say that you talk about here and then over here, right? What are some of the over here? What are some of the common things that are, besides not getting behind it, are there times when they try to start and maybe they get a false start? Are there ever false starts from leaders that they think they're coaching, but maybe they're really not? Do you ever see that?
Oh, sure. Well, so there's a definitional thing here that we struggle with as we, it always comes back to definition in my mind, but no matter what it is. Sales leaders, especially sales managers, have the idea that if they're spending time with their sales reps, they're coaching. And so if I ask a sales manager, I pull them aside and I said, hey, how often do you coach your sales reps? The response will be, I talk to my sales reps every day. Not what I asked. Right? How often do you coach your salespeople? And there's some great survey data from one of our clients. It's well, I shouldn't say who the client is, but anyway, so what a big client, big company, you would know them. Okay. They deployed a survey to the sales force, and there's so much in this. I mean, we could talk about this one example all day long, but anyway, they deployed a survey to the sales force, and they said, they asked sales managers, they said, how much coaching are you giving your sales reps on average per rep per month? And 93% of the sales managers said they were spending at least 3 hours per month coaching each sales rep, which sounds great. Unfortunately, they also asked the salespeople how much coaching.
93%.
93%. 93% of the managers, and there's over 100 managers. We're talking about large now. 93% said they were coaching each sales rep at least 3 hours per month. So then they simultaneously surveyed the salespeople that report to those managers, right? The exact same sales force, and 54% said they were basically receiving no coaching. Over half the people said they were receiving no coaching. But this is the way it happens, right? A sales manager rides along with a salesperson for 4 hours one afternoon.
Coaching.
And sales managers say, I just coached for 4 hours. Salesperson would say, I just got interrogated ruthlessly for 4 straight hours. It was unbearable. I couldn't get the guy out of my car. And so, it gets down to that thing that a salesperson knows when they've been coached. It feels value added. It changes the way they think. It changes the way they behave. And so part of the thing is, one of the biggest stumbling blocks is that we don't define what it is. And so in the end, people just think whatever they're doing, anytime they're having a conversation, they're coaching, and it's not the way it is. And with that company, we worked with them and defined coaching. And I used the example earlier. They weren't focused on improving the win rate. We focused on coaching early in the sales process, right? To disqualify bad opportunities, qualify good opportunities, and get them set on the right track. And the win rates went up. The win rates doubled in 18 months. And it was really from nothing more than just defining coaching and putting a lens on it. So one of the biggest problems, you ask about kind of what's over here, what are the biggest issues. So one is definition. One is very clearly definition. And hand in hand with that is not setting the proper KPIs to know whether or not succeeding. And to say we need people coaching so more of them hit their quota, well, that's true, but we need to get a little more refined as to exactly what we're hoping to change. And so the other thing is not obviously not defining what it is, not setting clear goals, and then the third is not measuring it. The book you mentioned, Cracking the Sales Management Code. I mean, it was a book about sales metrics. The foundational research for that book was we took a bunch of sales management reports from our clients, right, big companies, and we looked at what they were measuring, and there wasn't a lot of metrics on coaching. And all of those sales forces would have said we want our sales team to be coaching, but they were measuring it. And so, if you don't define it, the change isn't driven from the top. You don't have clear outcomes that you desire, and you're not measuring it. Then if you succeed, it's a total accident.
I love it. So we want to avoid accidental wins.
I mean, you'll celebrate them even if they're an accident.
Of course we will.
You can't expect it to be done consistently.
I love it. You gave me a few nuggets. When we send the video out to all the people, we'll usually send a little summary, and I'm going to have things like time does not equal coaching. Right? I love that nugget you just gave me. Conversations do not equal commitments. I kind of wrote that one down as well. We'll figure out something to say around the KPIs and measuring. Maybe measurements and metrics are two different things. A true measurement, I don't know, but I love it. Those are great metrics. And my favorite thing that you just may have said so far, Jason, is the perspective really matters. The the leader's perspective is I may be coaching, but the rep's like I've been interrogated. How do we get past that? That's a conundrum. That's a big one. That's got to be a hard one to get past, right? How do I have a leader say, wow, I am interrogating, and how do I get them committed to figure out how do they be relevant? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So when we in our programs, we work with sales managers to develop their coaching skills. One of the key distinctions that we have to draw for them, and once people get it, they get it, is the distinction between coaching and inspection. And so, coaching is this value-added interaction. And again, the outcome is the salesperson thinks or acts differently. Inspection is what most sales managers actually do, which is sitting down to verify data to get, and the conversation start innocuously enough. They start like this. Well, bring me up to speed. This is what the manager says, right? Bring me up to speed on what happened with this deal or what you did last week. It's really just a collection of data. It's kind of looking backward in time. It's often to measure compliance with some expectation, right? Did they make the sales calls? Did they put the data into the system? And so this idea of inspection is the primary activity of sales management. When sales managers are kind of taught there's this distinction between coaching and inspection, a lot of people go, I'm a world-class inspector. That's what I've been. And forward-looking conversations are coaching. And so the first thing we do is just try to establish that, look, there are a lot of things you do. You just put them into a couple categories. Are you inspecting data and inspecting the behaviors, or are you coaching to change the behaviors and change the data? And again, when most people are confronted with that reality, they get it. They go, yeah, you're right. I just scrub the data when I sit down to review the pipeline. We're not actually having a valuable conversation. And so sales managers want to do the right thing. They're not trying to be bad coaches. Most of them want to be good at it. It's just, they find themselves in a very reactive situation, sales managers. And they stay there unless they're knocked out of the rut.
You just hit another one of my favorite topics. I love where you're going with this, Jason. One of the things that I say in a lot of places that we both are at is, we're seeing that this coaching challenge where we have reps saying, keep me away from them, is happening at a time when there's more data available than ever before. Okay. Mm-hmm. We got data available that we've never had access to. It's more timely. It's more granular. I can benchmark it better. I can do all these things, yet percentage of reps hitting quota is going down, and the percentage of reps thinking I'm actually getting coached is also not great. Any thoughts around where that great divide? There's a Grand Canyon there. Can you help us with that?
Sure. Well, it's true that there's never been as much data in the history of, or at least accessible data in the history of sales, right? I mean, surely people had reports from the very beginning. I'm sure John Henry Patterson and NCR in the 1800s had a report.
And they're important. For sure, they're important.
Yeah. The part of the problem we see is that there's too much data. And people have fallen into the trap of, and I think this is somehow exacerbated by sales operations, we think that the more data we give the field, the bigger service we're doing the field. And in reality, we need to be giving fewer data points, but the more important data points. And so I think that the biggest issue is we have all this data that we don't know what to do with it. Right? If you have a report that has 200 data points on it, well, okay, but what are the 3 that matter? And I think that's the biggest challenge that we've seen with CRM, is that it's created this abundance of data that no one really knows what to do with. And that's, as you know, that's one of the themes in the book Cracking Sales Management Code, is you have to use the data productively to try to identify the few things that really matter. And 200 data points may be useful for analysis to identify the issues and to identify where you need to focus, but you shouldn't be measuring 200 things in the field. You should be measuring like 3. And we actually did a webinar myself with a guy named Carl Stringer, who used to be the head of sales operations and compensation at UPS.
Awesome.
Very data-driven company. And he said that they went through this exercise where they did a bunch of data analysis and tried to identify between 3 to 5 metrics that they knew drove success in each sales role. Right? So
who are they? Hit us.
Well, a key account manager would have 3 to 5, and a territory manager would have a different 3 to 5. Maybe inside sales rep would have a different 3 to 5, and if they're inbound or outbound, maybe they have a different 3 to 5. But the point was they had to analyze and process a lot of data to identify what were the few things that matter. But then they just focused on the few things that mattered. And I think that's the challenge in coaching using data, is to identify the few data points that matter. And you can focus. Then you can focus. And then you can coach to those KPIs, and then you see results.
So I want to make sure I got that right. And I like it. You're not saying there's only 3 for anybody, but for any company, if you have much more than 5 data points, you might be over-engineering it. Am I saying that right?
To use them to guide the sales force, yes. I mean, I think, as I said, you're going to gather all the data you can.
Of course.
Someone's going to analyze it.
Of course.
That's where you get the insights, right? I mean, someone should be inspecting what's going on to get insights and set direction. But when you're sitting down with a sales rep, have a conversation about performance, you need to have 3 or 4 things you're talking about. I mean, you can't say, okay, we've got 20 metrics here. You're succeeding on 10, you're kind of failing on 5, and you're so-so at 5. Because then what? I mean, what you need to be able to do is go, look, here are the 3 or 4 things that we agree matter, and here's how you're doing on 3 or 4 things. And if you're smart, those 3 to 4 things are actual activities, not outcomes. To sit down and say you're not making your quota is not a useful conversation. It's like when my kids come home and I look at the report card and I go, yeah, you need to make better grades. Well, of course, they know that.
Yeah.
They don't want to make bad grades. You have to spend some time. Well, what do? We need to study differently to get to school early if you can talk to teachers. And that's another challenge of coaching, is focusing on the activity level, not.
So I want to come back to activities in a second, because I think that's maybe one of the more important things we're going to talk about. But we talked about the here and there. We talked about the negative, maybe the things that we miss. Sometimes we assume time equals coaching, or KPIs equal coaching, or whatever. Let's go to the positive side of that. We're getting a couple people saying, so you gave me the negatives. What are the things that are right? Don't do this, do this. Are there two or three things that you do want to get right? I think it's going to take us into the activities conversation, but
yeah. So coaching has to, the task of coaching is really reverse engineering success, or the task of analyzing what it is you need to coach. I'm sorry, different way to say it. Reverse engineer success. So just to use an example that I said earlier. So if you have a sales rep and the goal for the year is to grow their existing accounts, well, let's reverse engineer that. What does that mean on an activity level? Does that mean that the salesperson needs to be focusing on very specific accounts? Does it mean they need to be growing the footprint in different business units within the account? And then what does that mean for sales calls? What if it means for the nature of the conversations? And then if you have a different salesperson who's instead trying to grow their territory, then that might look like a totally different conversation, right? So, okay, well, let's reverse engineer that. How are you going to grow your territory? We're going to make more prospecting calls. We're going to ask for referrals. But the idea is that to identify the important stuff, you basically just reverse engineer the outcomes that you want. And then once you identify the activities that will make a difference for a salesperson, those are the things you coach. Those are the kinds of skills that you coach to. Those are the kinds of behaviors that you want to improve. And again, this is kind of a one-on-one activity. So for one sales rep, it may be this activity that you're trying to develop, and another sales rep, it might be a different activity. And in my mind, that's where coaching is distinguished from management. Coaching is a one-on-one action where you're trying to maximize their performance individually, not management, which is kind of setting rules and expectations.
I like that definition. That's a good one. I'm taking notes. This is really good. I appreciate that difference. So you've led up to it. We've talked about it. One of the things that I love about your book and that I really agree with, and people that follow Xvoyant and watch and are familiar with me, they know I'm the same way. I believe that transformational results only come through transformational activities. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about that for a second. When you look at the leader's role, what are the key activities that a leader needs to do? And then how can we have that cascade down into the activities that a rep does? Let's start with that first one. Are there any key activities that you would say leaders make sure you're doing this? We've got a lot of leaders who are be watching what you're saying here. What are some of those things that we want to give them a checklist? Am I doing these things?
Well, I mean, I like to keep things simple. I don't know whether I have a simple mind or simple disposition, but anyway, I think you can't make things too simple, especially in the sales force, and not because the sales force, in the collection of smart people. In fact, research shows that salespeople are more educated than the working population. So the issue is salespeople don't have a lot of time. Sales leaders are probably even worse. And so we try to keep things as simple as possible, just because it has to be a brief conversation, it has to make total intuitive sense, or else it's a wasted conversation. So, to keep things simple, a sales leader should do a couple things. A sales leader should provide direction. Here's where we're going, here's what we're trying to accomplish, and then they need to provide guidance on how to do that. And very specific, detailed guidance on how to do that. You can talk about motivation. There's a wonderful piece of research that was published in Harvard Business Review many years ago, but it was by some university researchers. They looked into what motivates salespeople, and it was kind of curious. What motivates salespeople? Right? We all know this, right, Rob? It's like money, reward. Yeah, exactly. Rewards, recognition, compensation, incentives. The thing they found that was the most motivating to salespeople was simply having a clear task. To know exactly what to do to succeed. Because if you know what to do to succeed.
Listen to what Jason's saying, everyone. He is right. This is dead on. Start over and say it again, because this is a big deal, what you're saying, Jason.
Yeah, the most motivating thing to salespeople in the study was clarity of task. So if you know what to do as a salesperson, you're extremely motivated to do it. If I'm your manager and we agree that the way for you to succeed this year is to make 5 prospecting calls a day, and you make 5 prospecting calls and you succeed, you're motivated to do it again. If I tell you as a coach that you need to make 5 prospecting calls and you do it and you fail, you're pretty unmotivated. And so I think that, surely a part of a leader's role is to set vision, but then provide guidance and motivation. But I told the story because in my mind, motivation is providing guidance to what to do. If you provide guidance to what to do and people have confidence in it and they do it and they succeed, then you're motivating your sales team. And it doesn't come down to just lavishing more incentives on them or moving the bar so that it's more or less attainable. So if you're a sales leader and you're listening to this, clearly you've probably set the vision, you've assigned goals, you've communicated why we're doing the things. What you probably haven't done, particularly if you're far removed from the field, is provide guidance as to how they're going to get there. And this task becomes more and more important the lower in the organization you go. If you're a frontline sales manager and you haven't provided clear direction for your sales team to succeed, then you've done a disservice to everyone reporting to you. You can't just bang on quota and say this is your quota, you got to get there, we'll compensate you when you arrive. You really need to be guiding them and holding their hand and pushing them from behind to make sure they're going in the right direction.
That is good advice. I'm telling you, such good advice. Too many people. It's got to be. I would love to see a study on how much is invested in the motivational side of sales leadership.
Oh, billions.
Yeah. It has to be, Jason, when you look at everything. And to me, it's offensive as a professional salesperson, because it means that the only thing that's missing is you just need to work harder.
Yeah.
You're just a little too lazy right now, Rob. And I still haven't found the one, Jason, that wakes up in the morning and says, I hope I failed today.
No, and I also haven't seen too many salespeople who aren't working hard.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a comedy. If you actually think about the sales force, there's so much stuff put in place, mechanisms and incentives and processes to get the sales team to work harder. And it's really all built on this assumption, which is probably 100 years old when sales was very transactional, that if you work harder, you succeed more. And I talked about transactional versus consultative selling. The data will show that in transactional selling, if you work harder, you do succeed more. If you're making outbound calls, if you make 10% more calls, chances are you'll sell 10% more stuff. If you're knocking on doors selling newspapers, then 10% more doors might mean 10% more sales. But the more consultative selling becomes, the more skills involved, and the more reflection, the more insight, the more planning. And consultative selling, which I think is where most professional salespeople find themselves these days, because a lot of it's been taken over by the internet and catalogs before that. And if activity doesn't equal success, or volume of activity doesn't equal success. Doing the right activity equals success. And so, we've got incentives, we've got daily calls, we've got weekly targets, we've got spiffs, we've got all this stuff layered on the sales force under the assumption that if they work harder, they'll succeed more, or actually even under the more cynical assumption that they're not working as hard as they can. And I honestly don't know a lot of salespeople who aren't working as hard as they can. They want to succeed.
I have met a few that aren't willing to sometimes make the changes it takes. I've met that person, but that's where it stops. Otherwise, they're out of sales a long time ago. Okay, here's another question that I think, Jason, you're going to like. It says, how do you determine the high-value activities that you need to coach to? We've talked about activities, and you said we got to make sure we get it down to those right 3 to 5. People are wondering, is there a process or is there a way they can figure out what are those most important 3, 4, 5 things?
Sure. So as you know, in the book, Cracking the Sales Management Code, we basically took all these metrics. I mentioned before it was kind of a survey, a study of sales reports. And we broke it down into basically 3 levels of manageability, if you will, for these metrics. And so at the highest level, we said, look, there are business results in an organization. And those are achieving quota, revenue growth, maybe profitability at the organizational level, customer satisfaction, all these kind of high-level goals that frankly, as a salesperson, you get hired to do, and if you get fired if you don't, right? The business results, we call it. Yep. And then the layer down from that, we called sales objectives. And these are things like acquiring new customers or growing your existing accounts or selling certain types of products, right? Product mix, customer mix. And those are things that, the sales force is pointed toward. You say, go sell these products to those customers, but it's not quite yet manageable. And then the third level of metrics were sales activities. And these are things like making calls and coaching and training and all the activities the sales force engages in. And the idea is activities can be managed, right? You can tell someone to make more sales calls. You can tell them to have a different type of conversation. You can coach, right? You can set aside that time and do that. You can reallocate their time among different types of customers, A, B, C, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so the idea is that, and this is a big insight, but a simple statement, you can only manage activity. And so the idea, your question was, how do you identify the important stuff? Our framework is you reverse engineer that success. Perfect. So start with the outcome, right? So if my goal is to sell $2 million worth of stuff this year, well, what are the objectives? How am I going to get there? What are the sales objectives? So does that mean I'm going to acquire new customers? Does it mean I'm going to grow my existing accounts? If it's grow existing accounts, does it mean I'm going to sell stuff more expensive? Does it mean I'm going to increase price? Does it mean I'm going to cross-sell or upsell? And then, depending on how that question's answered, then what are the activities? Do I need to meet different people inside the accounts? Do I need to bring along a sales engineer with products I'm not familiar with? Do I need to engage a different sales rep? And so the idea to find the right activities, you just reverse engineer. What are the results I need? Those are usually given to the sales force. Those are their revenue goals. And then what's the best path there? That's the objective. And then what are the activities that make sense? And it's a simple little idea, but it's like in your life. If you when January comes, you're going to say, my goal this year is to be healthier.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean you want to lower your cholesterol? Does it mean you want to add lean muscle mass? Does it mean you want to lower your heart? What does that mean? Right? That's the objective. And based on the answer to that question, you'd eat differently, you'd exercise differently. I mean, you do different things depending on what the outcome is you're striving toward. And it's the same thing in sales. And it's not a difficult conversation, or it's not a difficult idea. We just don't do it because we're so focused on the prize, which is revenue.
Can't answer it better. For everybody, take notes. I hope that you guys hit rewind on that one a few times. Too many people, I think, are charlatans that come in and say, my way is the only way. This is what we do. The reason I love what Jason's doing is says, listen, there's a process to find them. Do more of the high-value things and less of the low-value things. Make sure you do those. You'll get there. He has a great way of helping you figure out what that is. And if you're not following Jason already, you just got a taste of why I love this guy and stuff. So keep following him. We're down to our last few minutes, Jason. This has been fantastic. Lots of interest is going on. And at the end, we'll make sure that we give you your contact info and however you want people to be able to follow more, reach out, et cetera. I got a couple things that I'd like to start winding down with in the next few minutes. Okay. The first one, you've talked about this. I want to see if we can summarize it. I'm trying to put it all in a little nutshell for everyone to have everybody walk away with nice, easy, tied up in a bow. Mm-hmm. If you were to say there are some elements for a blueprint for coaching success, are there any things that you would say this needs to be on your blueprint? And it may feel like we've talked about some of it already, but I'm just trying to say this is your checklist that you want to make sure you have when you get started coaching. Any thoughts that would go on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we did talk about it, but if you say, okay, I'm a new man, I'm gonna coach this year.
Yes,
that's what I'm saying. Like, coaching's gonna be my thing.
Yes.
The first thing you do is identify what's the objective of coaching. What's the outcome you're trying to achieve? And it can't just be more sales. Right? It has to be some objective, as I just defined it. Are we trying to increase our win rate? Are we trying to grow our accounts? Are we trying, what are you trying to accomplish with the coaching? Set a goal. What's the measure of success in that? And then identify the activities that are going to drive salespeople in that direction. And then those are the activities that you have conversations about. Those are the activities that you measure. And so if you have a clearly defined outcome in mind, if you identify activities that are going to drive the salespeople in that direction, and then you kind of set up a cadence, or we call it a coaching rhythm. But if you set up a rhythm or a cadence or a process to have those interactions, it's almost impossible to fail. And so the company we were talking about before, I have them on my brain. The one where 93% said they were coaching and 50% said they weren't. So what we did is, we said, okay, the goal is to improve the win rate, and the activity is going to be having salespeople better qualify their opportunities as they come into the sales pipeline. And then the management activity was every other week we're going to sit down with a salesperson. We're going to have them bring their top 3 opportunities that they just uncovered, and we're going to talk about those three opportunities. That's all we're going to do is talk about those 3 opportunities, and we're going to talk about how qualified are they and what's the strategy to win them. And if the sales managers do their job, and every other week they have those conversations, the salespeople do their job, they come to the meetings with 3 opportunities. How could something good not happen? It's not. This is not a. There's no. Most sales forces don't struggle or suffer from a lack of strategy. They suffer from lack of execution, and it's not even a mystery what they need to be doing. They just don't prioritize it and do it.
Love that. That's a great blueprint. It does stem to that one question for me. When you say cadence and rhythm, in your experience working with so many companies around the world, is there a desired frequency? I mean, is it as short as once a week? Is it more like once a month? Does it depend on what your sales cycles are? Any thoughts around rhythm on what coaching would be?
Sure. Well, it depends on a couple things. So it depends on what you're coaching. Right? Okay. So if you're coaching someone to be a better strategic account manager, probably not a conversation you can have every week. Right? You want to do annual planning for your or quarterly planning, with your sales rep, make sure they have a good strategy for their accounts, and it's a check-in, right? You're just trying to make sure that. But if you're coaching someone to make better sales calls, that's something that they do a dozen times a day, maybe longer, right? So if you're coaching someone to make sales calls, then maybe that is something you do daily or weekly. If you're coaching someone to pursue opportunities strategically, opportunity management is what we would call that. Then you only coach them as often as the opportunities arise. And that does come down to sales cycle length. If you have an 18-month sales cycle, you're going to coach people on that every day, probably not even every week. So it is, to some extent, it's an artifact of the pace of sales. But in our mind, it's more an artifact of what are you coaching them to improve, and what's the frequency when activity takes place.
That's a great one, Jason. That's a great one, because that's a really common question that I get. I bet you probably get that as well.
Sure.
Your answer of it depends on how often the activity happens is a really smart answer. I often go to cycle time. I think your answer is smarter than mine, because if they're doing calls every day, then potentially you could be doing that every day with them, right?
Well, your answer is if you're pursuing opportunities. So if you're coaching someone to win opportunities, then the cycle time matters.
Right.
If it's a short sales cycle, you need more frequent coaching. Otherwise, you'll miss opportunities. I mean, if you coach them every 6 months and you have a 3-week sales cycle, there's sales cycles going by, you're missing them completely. My definition is just a little broader. And
I like it. I want to finish and give you a chance to kind of beat your chest a little bit. Is there any favorite coaching story you've been involved with that you think the audience might be interested in hearing on, why, like an example of why coaching matters?
Well, let me just go with the example that I've largely given. That was one of our early successes, one of our kind of early marquee clients, and it was extremely insightful in so many ways. We were very deeply engaged with that client, and as I said in the beginning, they came to us with this problem, which was that their win rates were lower than they had been historically. They'd just done this survey. The sales managers thought they were coaching. The salespeople didn't think there was coaching taking place, and salespeople were right, of course, because salespeople are the customers of coaching. Right? Salespeople don't think you're coaching, then you're not coaching, no matter what the sales manager says. And so we did just what I just described. Right? We focused on what was the outcome they wanted, what were the activities that mattered, what behaviors from the sales managers would change the behaviors from the salespeople. We established a rhythm for them, which in that case I think was every other week, to sit down and have these very focused conversations. We defined what those conversations would look like, and their win rates over time went from, I think it was 25% to 54% of forecasted deals over the course of 18 months. And it wasn't easy. Change is easy to identify but hard to affect. But over time it was extremely powerful. And I mean, I could come up with dozens of other examples, but they would all follow pretty much that same path. What's the goal here of coaching? What are the activities that make sense? What does the sales manager need to do? How do we measure it? And then be diligent about it. And actually, I'll say one more thing about that, because it harkens back to another piece of this conversation. Interestingly, this company I referred to, we were working with a unit that had a division of the company that had 14 different business units. And the head of the training and development group, that was basically she was our customer. She went to the head of sales for every business unit, and she said, here's what we can do, right? We've had some success over here. I just need to know whether this is going to be a priority for you this year. And if you've got other priorities and this is going to be number 3 or 4 on your plate, then we'll come back in 6 months and see if we can do it then. And it was largely a success, because obviously the way we designed the program, the way it rolled out was a good methodology, but we only engaged where sales leadership was engaged in the change, and they were committed to it, and it was legendarily successful.
Awesome story. Jason, thank you for being with us. We're going to wrap up. We've got a lot of people that are sending stuff in. We'll make sure that we get back to some, and we'll give Jason the opportunity to get back to some of you as well. Jason, let's just finish up with, how do people follow you? How do people find you? We're going to have on the final screen some contact information that you want us to share with them. But how do they get more of what you're putting down?
Well, so I'd invite everyone to go to our website, which is vantagepointperformance.com. I know it's a long URL, but at vantagepointperformance.com, we have a resource center that we've invested a lot in developing, and there are archived webinars like this. There are white papers, research papers, there's infographics, blog posts, and it's all categorized by sections. So there's a section on coaching, section on training, section on pipeline management, section on metrics.
Cool.
I think that's the greatest resource, but surely, find me on LinkedIn, not too hard to grab. Find me on Twitter, Jason R. Jordan, and hopefully we can have a conversation.
Icon in the sales industry, one of the dudes on a short list of people that I think really get coaching. Jason, you're the man. Thanks for what you've done. We appreciate you having us. Congrats on your success. Can't wait to see the next book, and we'll look forward to getting together soon.
All right, Rob. Thanks a lot.
Talk soon. Thanks.